We're glad to have you back for another episode in Season 1 of the Black Fatherhood podcast series, a collection of video conversations covering a wide spectrum of intricately connected topics related to Black fatherhood. I am Dr. Alvin Thomas, clinical psychologist and assistant professor in the School of Human Ecology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We have been speaking on the Black Fatherhood podcast unapologetically about issues related to Black fathers, but with a full awareness of how Black fathers affect and are affected by their families. Black fathers are a key component of the family system. But is this Black family thing a construct? Is it necessary to discuss it as different from other families? Are there specific challenges and roles that are unique to the Black family? Joining me in discussing today's topic, the Black family, are Dr. Lucian Yates III, Interim Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs at Kentucky State University. Also with us is Mr. Floyd Stokes, the founder and executive director of the American Literacy Corporation, a nonprofit promoting reading to children that he founded in 2000. He is the author of over 25 children's books and is a 6-year veteran, or at least served for 6 years in the US Army. He was born, of course, and raised in the Mississippi Delta and currently lives in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. But he will tell us a little bit more about himself, and so will Dr. Yates. Gentlemen, thank you very much for agreeing to be part of this discussion, and welcome to the Black Father podcast series.
Thank you for having me.
So maybe how we could start off is have maybe Dr. Yates go first and tell us a little bit about what you do, your work, this rich body of work that you have, and maybe how it relates to Black fathers specifically.
Sure. I am Lucian Yates III. I retired from Kentucky State. I'm now endowed chair, distinguished professor of education at Simmons College of Kentucky, a small HBCU in Louisville, Kentucky, around the Baptist faith. Okay. I flunked retirement. I was retired for 21 days, and I was conscripted back into to service. My work essentially has been around running schools and teaching people to work in schools, okay? I maintain that you can't have a strong Black family without employment. You can't have a strong father unless they have some type of employment. And what I've been doing is teaching people that education is within their grasp and they can do great things with an education. So this is my 4th HBCU that I've worked in. I worked at Prairie View A&M University, Kentucky State, Tennessee State, and now Simmons College of Kentucky. I've had opportunities to go to PWIs, but I think my work is more situated in HBCU context.
Thank you very much for that. So we have something in common. I'm a proud graduate of Morehouse College.
Okay. Okay.
So we have that HBCU history in common. How and if I end up returning to Morehouse as a professor, as a provost, hey Morehouse, if you're listening, as a provost or something else, we'll see how that goes. Thank you very much. And so Mr. Stokes, go ahead and kind of tell us a little bit about what you do, what you're doing, and its import to Black families and to Black fathers.
Yes, thank you again for having me. As founder and director of the American Literacy Corporation, we exist to promote reading to children. We do that a number of different ways. I'm, as you mentioned, an author of over 25 children's books. We go to schools and libraries and community events, reading to kids. One of the programs that we have is the 500 Men Reading, where we get men to go into schools and read to kids. They go to schools, daycare centers, Head Start programs, libraries reading to kids. It's important for our children to see men embrace education. So that's some of the stuff that we do. as the founder director of the American Literacy Corporation. As you mentioned, I started this organization in 2000. So about 22 years I've been, running this organization. And before that, I was, had a little, business downtown Carlisle. And before that, I was in the Army. So, I decided that when I had my business downtown Carlisle, Pennsylvania, I decided that I was spending more time on boards and nonprofits, and I needed to do something, that was more along my passion. So I founded this nonprofit, the American Literacy Corporation. As Dr. Yates, he mentioned, education is key. It is. And if we can get kids started early, embracing reading and learning, then it sets them up for much success throughout their career in school and college and what is VOTEC or trade school or what have you. It'll carry them throughout their lives.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I know in a couple of the other episodes, we've talked about reading as an example of an activity that fathers can engage their children with as young as a couple of months old. So the fact that you have this wide range of books that fathers can tap into to read to their children, I think is awesome as well. Thank you very much for that. So I think we'll jump.
If I could,
go right ahead.
I remember something my mother told me one time. She said, "Boy, if you can read, you can go places. You may never go to China, but you can read about what life is like in China."
Yep.
And so in one of my iterations when I was assistant superintendent here in Louisville, I took every Thursday to go read to kids in a preschool. And the reason I did it, it was a predominantly Black preschool. The reason I did it, because the statistics are that so many of our kids have never seen a Black man read. So why should I learn to read? I don't know anybody that reads. So I wanted them to see me. So I missed one Thursday because I had some popping off things in the district. And I went the next week. They said, "You were not here last week. Where were you?" And I said, "Oh, wow. I didn't realize how powerful that 30 minutes a week meant to kids."
Yeah. On another episode, I will probably talk about a similar experience that I had doing some reading at an elementary school in my neighborhood. The response of some of the Black kids in that classroom, and of one little Black girl in particular, it hit home the exact message that you're talking about, not just from the point of view of representation, but of possibilities.
That's right.
Recognizing the possibilities and changing narratives, adjusting beliefs. And for that little girl, she left that day, I think, changed. I left that day changed because we had spent that time together reading that book. So some other episode we will discuss that. But today we want to jump in and talk about the Black family. So I think the first thing is trying to figure out whether or not there is such a thing as a Black family, the Black family. What constitutes the Black family? Like, is there some kind of prototype or some kind of general definition for what a Black family is?
I'll start.
Okay, go ahead.
Not by theoretical definitions, but by practice.
Okay.
The Black family has always had this extended family. So it was not just mother and father, but sometimes grandparents lived in the home, and the entire community became a wraparound service for that child. So you mess up out in the community, Mr. Short down the street has permission to discipline me, and then they're gonna call home, and when I get home, I'm gonna get it again. What happened was when we left the central city and moved to the suburbs and then to the exurbs, we started taking on those characteristics. So all of that help that we've been getting in the past, many of our kids today don't get. And so that concerns me. And I think that's the reason we have so much violence. We don't know how to solve problems, et cetera, because we haven't been taught how to do it. And so I think some of these things are simply by design. Moved us out of the central city to the suburbs, and then gas goes to $5 a gallon. You see what I'm saying? So, and now they're living in the central city, in high rises, gated communities, so forth, in the city. And at one point in my life, I was not a conspiracy theorist. But the longer I live, this thing is happening so systematically and by design that somebody has designed this. And so I think when we have strong families, they can't tear us apart. But if they tear us apart, we can't have strong families. And I think that's what has happened in this country.
Yeah. So, Dr. Yates, I was hoping to wade into some of these issues, and you just took us into this head first dive right
I'm
into.
Sorry.
I like it. I like it. I like it. I really like it. There's going to be so much to unpack, and I can already tell that there's going to be even more packed on top of what we have to unpack. That we'll spend days trying to figure out a lot of what we discussed today. But I'm going to allow you to jump in and try to either respond or to answer some of those questions around whether or not there is something as the prototypical Black family or what constitutes the Black family, and of course to respond, of course, to some of what Dr. Yates proffered there.
Yeah. So I think the prototypical Black family. There's no one size fit all, except our collective experience that, from the history, right? But you have, whether it be single moms, single dads, LGBTQ, you have, multicultural families, blended families. You have, maybe someone, with a white spouse or Asian or Hispanic or what have you. But, the Black family exists, though it doesn't look the same for everybody, except for our shared experiences in history. And so I will agree with Dr. Yates in that, we move around so much now as a people that it makes it hard for the community to be stabilized. And so you're right, Dr. Yates, in that, when we were growing up, mostly we were in the neighborhood. A few people moved back and forth from the neighborhood, but primarily it was a stable neighborhood, stabilized. And so we had an opportunity to know, Mrs. Brown down the street or Mr. Brown, and they could get at us, right? But we're moving around so much that now, we don't have an opportunity to build those relationships. And I definitely think that the Black family, if you will, is suffering some because of that, because we don't have those people looking after us, correcting us, and being a part of that village that's needed. So when Johnny is not, in the yard and he's down the street, there used to be someone else that could correct him. Right. And we were comfortable with that person correcting them because we knew them. But now, us being here, I'm in the suburb. I know my neighbors, but my kids don't really know them, and we don't know each other well enough for them to correct them.
So I published a paper, I think in 2016 or somewhere there about this issue called, this resource called collective efficacy. The idea that people in a neighborhood, in a community, have some shared values, shared beliefs, and a shared worldview. and how this level of collective efficacy, even if kids didn't know what it was, the fact that they knew Mr. Brown down the street and they knew Miss Mabel, who was sitting on her porch watching them play and while they were playing in the streets, the fact that they knew those people and those people were looking out for them, that collective efficacy was directly linked to young people, young Black boys specifically, feeling safer in their neighborhoods and feeling more comfortable in the neighborhoods. But both of you are talking about this kind of dichotomy now, where we have Black families in the urban and suburban and rural areas, and how the Black family looks different because that what I would call subsidized parenting. So while mom is upstairs cooking and you're outside with your friends playing in the street, there are 5 or 6 other older adults sitting on the porch watching on. So the likelihood of some kind of harm coming to you was almost nil. It was always present, but it was almost nil, or at least there would be somebody to report on what happened. So that was that subsidized parenting. But it seems as if this subsidized parenting is less and less the further out you go. And so I don't know if either or both of you could speak to what this suburban and urban versus rural Black family might look like, and how might they be different?
I'm not sure that they are different for the Black experience. I think sometimes when we get to the suburbs, many of us take on the dominant role of white folk, and we try to behave like them, okay? But when you're in the inner city or rural, you don't have that same type of nuance. So I'm not sure that they are much different, but sometimes when we move up to the east side, we start acting like we belong in the east side. When all you have to do is ask OJ. He's just a rich one. or you might be a smart one, but you still one.
Right.
And so we can't fool ourselves, lull ourselves to believe that we have made it, because at the drop of a hat, we will not have made it.
You know, I've only been in the suburbs, I say about 5 years. Prior to that, you know, it was townhouse. We were very close living quarters, and I was there about 15 years, and I saw a similar change in the way we operated, in that, you know, especially with me moving into the neighborhood and not getting to know people, yes, but there still was a separation that, and part of it, it's just a change in time. A lot of people are to themselves, and we didn't have a lot of togetherness opportunities. It was a lot of separation, and it wasn't just African Americans living there, it was a mixed community. And part of it is, I think people are mind your own business, some of that, stick to yourself. You know, those are not my kids. I was forced to, I'll say, correct some kids because of some interactions that we had, you know, but for the most part, people stayed to themselves, even in the urban setting that I was in. So, you know, I think that it has much to do with today's way of family operating rather than the locale, because I see a similar pattern of how we operated when I was urban, and now, you know, I'm a little bit suburban, but, you know, not that far removed.
So I'm happy that you mentioned that, Mrs. Stokes, because I was going to ask what exactly is the standing of the Black family in today's America. And I mean, I know that we have lots of Black families in inner cities living in these neighborhoods. where there's still not that feeling of subsidized parenting, where other adults are looking out for kids. And a lot of kids are spending most of their time indoors, spending their time inside of their homes. It almost feels as if each home or each apartment is a little world unto itself. And kids don't get that space to go outside and walk through the streets or walk through the neighborhoods. And so I was wondering, as you think about what the Black family used to be like, I think Dr. Yates talked about, and you talked about as well, this idea of the village, and I talked about the collective efficacy and all that wonderful stuff, which almost sounds very, very romantic. And you're now telling us that feels like that romance is not quite there in the same way. What then does the Black family look like in America today? What's its standing? Is it the same? Can we expect similar things? Is it degenerating? Is it improving? Is it in a state of flux? Where is it?
I think the Black family is deteriorating from without and from within. All of us are products of three institutions: the family, the church, and the school. And for many of our kids, all three of those are dysfunctional. So how can we expect kids to be functional or solve problems through talking rather than pulling out a gun and solving it that way? Because the institutions that made us are not there to make them. Some churches you go in are more like country clubs than they are houses of worship. Okay, so people don't feel connected even there. You have dysfunctional families. If I go down a grocery store aisle one more time and see a parent just take the fist and hit a little child in the back of the head, and little head bobbles around and so forth, we got spankings, but they were controlled. It was not in anger. It was to teach us a lesson. They're not having that. And so they don't know how to solve issues. They don't know how to solve problems. And that's the reason they'll cuss out a teacher is to look at them. And that's the reason people are not going into the profession of education, is because they are afraid. And I think that's part of what has happened in some of our communities, that people say, oh, I'm not going to deal with them. I don't know how they're going to react if I correct little Johnny or little Susie, So I think it's dying from within and from without. We have to look at racism. We have to look at economic disparities. We have to look at health disparities. All those things from without that's hidden at the family, but also we have some things churning on the inside as well.
Mr. Stokes, I'll let you respond to some of that if you wish.
Yeah, definitely. We have work to do, but I also see a lot of positive kind of signs that there's progress being made. In my community, I also there's another institution as well I want to add to that, Dr. Yates, and that's the area that I'm operating in, which is nonprofits, which is taking up the slack of some of that village and those wraparound services that's needed, and so the importance of nonprofits, whether it be the neighborhood centers, the Boys and Girls Clubs, the mentoring programs, and those kinds of services can help take up the slack where there's some lacking with neighborhoods and communities. And certainly we have so much work to do, and we always will. But I think the nonprofit arena, and whether such as we having our summer camp that ended a week ago with a writing and art camp, and the kids who attended, the majority of them were minorities, and every last one of them wanted to sign up for next year, or be, if they age out, which we only take up to 8th grade, some of them will be going into the 9th grade, they want to be junior counselors. But there's a lot of good work done in the nonprofit arena that we can capitalize on. And I'll say, some of it is, families and parents having kids at a younger age, so, and not having those skills needed in order to know how to parent properly, Dr. Yates. And that's why you see those interactions. And I cringe too. I just saw yesterday where this mom was, yelling at the kid, come on down the grocery aisle, right? But, again, we have parents who are sending their kids to college, and you have men like the guys who participate in my program, the 500 Men Reading, who come back and who are crying and say, much like you said, Dr. Thomas, this experience has changed my life forever. I mean, I'm talking grown men, right, with tears in their eyes, saying the difference that it has made, and it has encouraged them to give back more, and to visit that classroom more, like you, Dr. Yates, every Thursday, or come back during career day as well, or come back, during special occasions. So we have a lot of things that we can build on the success, but we definitely have work to do.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's a tension, because I think Dr. Yates and yourself rightly point out the significant degradation of the bonds that these institutions, the school, the home, the family, and in some cases the nonprofits, have lost, and the effect that loss has had on the family, and has had specifically on different members of the family, different the variation of effect on different members of the family. But then I think you're also pointing out, Mr. Stokes, all of those other positives that are happening at the same time. So yes, there's a loss, and there's continuing loss, but there's also an attempt to try to catch up to that loss and build on that loss. And I think the question remains then: are we catching up quickly enough, or are we suffering enough degradation quicker than we're able to build? And I think some of the work that we're talking about with regard to Black fatherhood is about this. It's about working with fathers, working with parents who are themselves in very many ways still themselves kids. So you have grandmothers at 20-something and 30-something. You have fathers at 20 and 15 and 18. And they're themselves still trying to figure out who they are, trying to define themselves, and then have to kind of do it for somebody else. And so if we have resources in the community, older fathers, veteran fathers who could come alongside and provide some of these, kind of like we're doing today, these discussions of these varying issues for the family and for the individual, and provide opportunities for them to engage in other ways with their children and learn other skills, soft as well as hard skills, to be able to effectively parent, but also to effectively contribute to their family and to their community. I think if we can multiply that, so not just your program, Mr. Stokes, but having a number of different programs across the community doing these different things, if we can multiply those things, then I think a lot of what Dr. Yates was talking about, we can start erasing some of those negative effects. But I think the reality is that we may not be doing it as quickly as we need to, because we're seeing the effect in our communities. It's not, we can't pretend like it's not there.
Well, I have to address that my program starts at home.
Good.
My two daughters who are at home, I have 3 grown children, but my 2 daughters 14. I have to think about it. She had a birthday July 30th. She worked hard to be 14. Right?
Can't take that from her.
And then my 18-year-old who's going off to college, who has a full academic scholarship.
Congratulations to all of you.
Yeah. And we read every single night to this day. So it's not a community program. It's my life. You know, I believe in exposing my kids and all kids to world-class people. You know, I don't remember a lot of the sermons that I've heard throughout the years, but the one that sticks with me is one pastor said, if you want to raise world-class children, and I heard it 20-something years ago, if you want to raise world-class children, you have to take them around world-class people. There are world-class people in our community, and there are world-class people on the national and international stage. And I have people, and you can say celebrity, but people who are successful in their own right, that my kids know by first name basis. They don't call them by their first name.
Right. Of course not.
But they know what success looks like.
Yeah.
And so that's what we have to be purposeful in raising our kids and making sure that they know what success looks like. And success, first of all, looks like a person who cares about people. People, kids who are mannerable, who are respectful, who cares about their neighbor. And so once they get theirs, whatever that is, they're going to give back as well. So I'll stop there, but you know, that's part of it. So it's my program, but it's my life.
Yeah. And, you know, as I think about the assault on not only the Black family, but the whole diaspora with critical race theory, can't teach about history, can't do all those kind of things. So, you know, the one little lady started a banned book club where she has all across the country reading these books that have been banned. But somebody has to take up the slack to make sure that kids know their history. Now, when I was in one of my lives, I was invited by the St. Petersburg City Council in Russia to come and work with teachers and principals as they moved from communism to democracy. Now, it was a life-changing event for me. But one of the things that I saw that they did, every Saturday, they had school. And that school on Saturday was to learn about the Jewish faith that the Bolsheviks, you know, sequestered. So they had to go learn about the real history of their particular group. And I think if kids knew that they came from kings and queens and people that invented all kinds of stuff, including algebra, then they might be more prone to say, I can do that. So I think nonprofits, yes, but churches have to take up their responsibility as well and do some things on Saturday, you know, summer school academies and so forth, on and on and on.
I often have people talk about history not being taught, and my usual response to that is history is always being taught. Even when a person decides to silence a particular part of history, that's not silencing history. That's just changing which part of history you teach. History is always being taught, even when it's being taught incorrectly, even when it's being taught with a specific slant to it. So history is always being taught. We talk a lot about community, but what exactly is community? We talk about the church being part of the community and the role of the church. And I think from when we think back of America's recent history, the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, well, maybe 50 or so years, we think of the civil rights marches, we think of the revolts against Jim Crow and all of those things that were going on. And if we look back, honestly, we realized that at the core of all of that work was a very determined church, was a very determined community, was a very specific thread that connected everybody who was involved, Black, white, and otherwise. Everybody who was connected and supported that particular work. And it feels, I think we saw a glimpse of it around the protests related to George Floyd's murder.
Right.
We saw
right.
a glimpse of it, and then almost as quickly it seemed to have disappeared, or at least to have gone underground. People, we've gone back to doing our own thing. We've gone back to looking for mine and taking care of mine and taking care of me. And churches have gone back to doing what churches have done since then, taking care of themselves and lulling themselves to sleep with the false belief that everything is okay.
Right.
We pop up again when there's another protest, when another Black body lays on the street, we pop up again. But what exactly then, if not existing to be able to provide support for families and support for Black fathers and support for Black babies and Black children and Black mothers, what exactly is the role of community? But first, maybe what exactly is community? We talk about Black community all the time. What is that?
I see it as, and you're the psychologist, sociologist, but it's voluntary conglomeration of folk with common ideals, principles, precepts, mores, and so forth. But it's voluntary, okay? And I think what Mr. Stokes has said earlier, that in some of our communities, be they in the urban setting, we have failed to come up with that common set of principles and so forth that make us one. Community has the same root word as common, okay? Or commune. You know, all of those are the root words, the roots of that word, and it means that we come together as one. And I don't think you have to be Black to come together.
Yep, exactly.
We could come together as, you know, a myriad of races to say, this is what and I think you're ready to see this with the abortion ban. You're gonna see a whole bunch of different kind of women coming together and using their collective voices to either kick people out of office or put people into office. Much like you saw with George Floyd.
Right.
And all these people beginning to run for political office because they said, I can do that better.
Yeah.
And that's what communities do. They come and say, how can we make this better for everybody? And if, you know, it's a mistake, but if I button my shirt and put the button in the wrong hole, then all the other buttons I put on gonna be off center. And that's what happens when you don't have community. Everything is off center. And I just suggest that what we have to do is we have to come together and say, this is what we believe in. Here's how we're going to go about doing it. Anybody got a better idea? Let's move. And I think that's what we have to do in terms of community.
Mr. Stokes, I liked when you talked about your organization, your reading organization. And I think I was pushing you a little bit on it, and you kind of helped us rethink about it and say, no, this is not just an organization. This is my life. This is how I live. This is how I interact with my children. And all I've done is allowed the positive experiences and positive practices that I do in my own life and in my children's life to spill out to other children and to other families and to other members of my community. And so I wonder what other things might fathers be able to be doing with their children and then allow it to spill out into the community and to others outside of that. And where and what is the Black family's responsibility to the community? And what is and where is the community's responsibility to the Black family?
Yeah, so it definitely starts at home.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the friends
Mm-hmm.
of my children that I brought along with me as well. So that's the village. And I'm smiling because I see the picture, about 20 kids at a pool hall with a bowling alley, that we made like probably 3 trips to pick people up. A couple of parents dropped the kids off, but I broke a couple of traffic violations because people were on top of each other.
Right.
But they remember those moments. The friends to remember when we did this.
Yeah.
And that's what we must multiply.
Yeah.
And those moments of taking them to museums and taking them to plays and taking them, to outside their community. Your community, the world is so vast. Yes. So part of it is that we're going to show you in books, but we're gonna get to that hour and a half, that 2 hours. We're gonna make that sacrifice and drive a little bit to places, 5-6 hours, whatever it is, just so you can see that your community, because the some parents don't have the means to even drive an hour and a half.
Yeah.
This is the first, how many times have you heard, this is the first time this kid has been, and Dr. Yates, I know you being in education, how many times, if you could have gotten a nickel for every time you heard a kid say, this is the first time I've experienced this, you wouldn't have failed retirement. You would have been on a beach somewhere. You would have been on a beach somewhere for sure. You could be on a beach now, but man.
Let me tell you, this is so interesting that you say that. When I wrote a grant when I was at Prairie View called B Cubed. Mm-hmm. It's called Black and Brown Brothers. It was that junior faculty would mentor upperclassmen. Mm-hmm. Upperclassmen would mentor freshmen. And freshmen have to go back into the public schools and mentor those kids. It's a multi-tiered mentoring process. Right. Well, this one brother that I had him work with me on developing a proposal for AERA, the American Education Research Association, and it was accepted. This kid had never been on an airplane.
Wow.
Never had been on an airplane. He got the research bug, and he's now finishing his doctorate. And he said it all started with you to make me understand that research is something that I want to do.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah. And I could tell you many of those kinds of stories. There are about 25 PhDs walking around now because I chair their dissertations.
Right.
And they're doing all kinds of fantastic work. And as I look back on my career, as I'm getting ready to ride into the sunset, for real this time, as I start looking at that, I look back and say, what could I have done more of to reach more students?
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot. I think about it a lot.
And I think so far the analytics for the podcast show that about 79% of the people who are listening to this are men. And so I think for the men who are listening, it's recognizing the thing that you do and the thing that you can do and do it.
Yes.
If you like running, then get the kids in your neighborhood and run.
Exactly.
That's right.
If you like playing basketball as a youngster, you might not be a basketball player, but gather them and play basketball with them, teach them, help them. because it's not so much so what you do, it's that you're doing it.
Yes.
It's that an adult has taken the time to invest in me. And like Mr. Stokes said, it's being able to look back at the memories, the experiences, and say, remember when we did, remember that time? And it's opening kids' eyes. So if you're in Milwaukee, take some kids down to on an afternoon, you're back from work or you're off from work that day. It might be the day that you want to sleep in. Take 10 kids from your neighborhood and go down to the African American Holocaust Museum and walk around and see some stuff. There are kids who are living in Milwaukee who may have never seen that museum, or go to the Natural Arts Museum, or go to a park, something that takes the kids outside off their front stoop and allows them to experience the world beyond their neighborhoods, beyond their city, beyond their state, beyond their country. And if you don't have the money to be able to take them beyond their country, then take them to the library.
Yes.
And read some books. Yes. Read books together. Take them beyond their country, beyond their imaginations. Let their imaginations soar. And it doesn't take a lot to do that. It does not take a lot to do that. All it really takes is your intention to want to pour into somebody else. And
I think what happens a lot of times, men think that they have to be perfect.
Yes.
To do some of these things. And you don't. You just have to be willing.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're concerned about how to start it with your kid.
Yes.
Start it with your own kid.
Let them be the guinea pig. It's like, that worked out pretty well.
Yep. And if you don't have kids, then start it with your nieces and nephews.
Yes.
Your cousins.
Yes.
Your friends' kids.
Yes.
Pour into a kid's life. Change a kid's life. And I think as we talk about community and we talk about how community affects family, that's how community affects family. And that's how family affects community. That we have to be willing to say, we're not waiting on a politician to do this for us. Right. We're not even going to wait on a nonprofit to do it for us. We become the nonprofit. Yes. There is no profit to me to go to a middle school and read to a kid. There is no profit to me. That I am that nonprofit. You become a nonprofit for your
Dr. Thomas.
Yes, sir.
There is. That's some of the best happiness you could ever have.
Hey.
It's somewhat selfish for me to do it.
It is. I love it. It's very selfish. I love it.
It really is. It really is. And I'd be remiss if, I know we're running out of time, but, your degree is in psychology. About a year ago, the American Pediatric Association came out with an apology saying that for the Black children and for Black people, we've been too white. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that? They apologized because they realized that their studies were too slanted towards white people. Yeah. And it's not the same experience that you talked about at the beginning of your podcast. No. So your profession and you, especially with us coming out of the pandemic and the effects that it has had on this trauma, not just the pandemic, but the trauma of the violence against, the discrimination and what our children are dealing with on a daily basis and seeing and having to, they can't process it. Mm-hmm. So folks like you become really, really an important piece to this puzzle.
I mean, that's why we're having these conversations, because I'm hoping that a father is going to be listening to, or some Black man is going to listen to this and hear this, and something that they hear in at least one episode spurs them to action to say, I need to do something to take care of me, so that I can be present to take care of a kid, yes, whether it be my kid or somebody else's kid. And if I can do that, one, I experience the pure joy of being able to impact somebody's life and see on their face and in their action that they've been impacted. But I also get to sit back and watch that light that I helped spark move on and grow brighter and grow bigger. But that work has to start from somewhere. And I really applaud both of you for the work that you've done and are doing, and hope that you continue doing this. But as we kind of start pulling this to a close, I want to, again, my last question was going to be about what can passionate individuals do about uplifting Black individuals and Black families. And I think we kind of are already discussing it, right? But thinking of the persons who might be listening to this podcast, fathers, Black men, women of varying races and identities, persons who do research, persons who provide services, nonprofit organizations, policymakers, whoever might be listening, kids themselves, whoever might be listening to this podcast, what one or two practical pieces of advice would you offer to Black fathers who might be listening to this podcast? One
I would say is like Nike, just do it. Do something. Our communities have been ravaged with two pandemics, racism and coronavirus, and we suffer from both of those. But we have to do some things with counter storytelling and working with kids to say, I don't care what the teacher said, you can learn algebra. Come on, let's do it.
Yeah.
And so we got to change the narrative to make people believe in themselves. And I never will forget, I did a study and I talked to some kids that probably never should have been teachers. And I asked them, tell me what it was that made you want to become a teacher. And I get chill bumps. This kid graduated from Wisconsin with a PhD. He said, you believed in me before I believed in myself. And because you believed in me, I started believing in myself. And now I have a PhD from UW. So we never know what those little things that we do, and as Mr. Stokes said, what impact it has down the road, okay? My daughter gave me a book for Father's Day, and it has little starters in there where you jot down stories from your past. And she's telling me, I want to know from your past what I should be passing on to my daughter, okay? And so I haven't yet started writing. Every time she calls, she says, have you started writing yet? No, I haven't, but I need to. And that's what we need to do with our kids, not only our biological kids, but all kids, to say, you are not a product of your current environment. You can exceed and go beyond that, okay? Just because you might not have the resources, you still can learn. And that's what I think we have to do for all people.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Stokes.
Yeah, I will agree in just make the choice to work with children and create an opportunity to bring the best out of them and see the best in them and help to bring it out. I remember going into a detention center on a weekly basis to do a reading component, a literacy component with them for about an hour, and week after week. And about a year, not even a year later, I remember being at a mall and there was three guys creating ruckus, two of them mostly. One of them was laying back a little bit, and they were creating a scene. I decided, should I go up to them or not? It is one of those decisions. Right. Should you get involved or not? And I found the courage to go up to the ringleader and say something to him, because the other one was following.
Right.
And I went up to the ringleader and I said, excuse me, can you keep it down a little bit? He reared up at me. And when he did, the third guy, who was the follower, said, excuse me. The third guy was one of the guys who was in my program at the detention center.
Right.
And he told the ringleader, he said, you can't talk to him like that. That's Floyd Stokes.
Right.
You don't know who he is, but you can't talk. And the guy backed down. That, I've received a lot of awards, but that's happened to me twice since I've been operating in the community. That's some of the best award that I could receive, that not knowing the difference that I was making. Mm-hmm. I'm going in, he's not saying much. He's being a part of the program. He's doing his activities, but I'm not really knowing how it's affecting him. I'm not really knowing how my interaction is affecting him. And it turned out that it was affecting him way more than I could even imagine, because he put his friendship on the line for me.
Yeah. I really hope that one father hears this and one Black man hears this and is able to draw real power and energy from this and is able to do something with it, and that multiple lives are changed and adjusted because of this. The two things that I come off with are to be planful and deliberate. Mr. Williams, the subject of King Richard, that's Venus and Serena's father. There's a piece that was written about him. Well, in his biography, actually, he talked about writing a 78-page plan for his daughters when they were born, about exactly what he was going to do and how he had planned to make sure his daughters were successful. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to, when you have a child, even if your child is already 5, 10, 15, 20 years old, you can still start planning now. If you haven't planned yet, sit back now and spend some time planning. Think about what you want for your child. And don't just talk about it or think about it. Write it down and go back and review it every so often to see if you're on the right track and how you might need to change it. I worked with Dr. Cleopatra Caldwell, who appears on this podcast as well, in a program called the Fathers and Sons Program. And in one of the sessions of the Fathers and Sons Program, the father who does not live in the house with his son, he and his son sit together and talk about the objectives that they have for this child's life, the goals that they have for this child's life. And the father and the son work together to think about what that child wants to become, what the father hopes for him. They think about what the family's motto is going to be, what the family's values are going to be. They sit and they think about it and they talk about it and they write those down, and they can come back afterwards and revise it. That setting a very specific roadmap for the life of that child, and a roadmap that the child internalizes, so that when the parent is not present, that roadmap is there, that compass is there. We have so many young men, so many young people walking around without a compass because nobody ever helped them develop that compass.
Yes.
So spending that time and actually helping kids develop that compass. And the other is, like Dr. Yates said, just do it. Read, walk, cook, grill.
Fish.
You don't have to catch fish to be successful at fishing. All you need is rope, twine, and a rod. Throw it in there, tie a worm to it, whatever you need to do. You may catch nothing, but the experience of standing there with a man and being able to get the full attention of that man and doing something together, that means the world. Like you said, Mr. Stokes, that you may think to yourself, well, we went fishing and we caught nothing. Or we went walking and we didn't get very far. We just stopped at McDonald's and talked the whole time. We may think that we have had no impact, but then you ask that little child what that impact was for them, what they did that day. Or you listen to them 10 years from now, and they come back and tell you, because you did X, because you wouldn't let me give up on my maths homework, today I'm an engineer, or today I am a nurse, or today I'm getting a PhD, or whatever it is. The things that we think of as unimportant, for these individuals, it means the world. Give it, pour it into them, because they need it. They're thirsty for it. I think, Mr. Stokes, you had your hand up.
Yes, I don't want to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Along the lines of what you were saying, and Dr. Yates, how many times have you met the kid, like my grandson, who's 5? You know, he's getting ready to go to his birthday is next month, but he's getting ready to go to first grade. He's active. He's moving. He was here this weekend visiting from Jackson, Mississippi, and he was in the living room causing ruckus, right? And as a punishment, I told him, I said, you come in here and sit with me. Grant, that's the punishment, right? So I had him sit with me for about 10 to 15 minutes. And then after that time was over, I told him, okay, now you can go back and sit with the rest of them. He's like, no, I don't want to go. What do you mean? You don't want to go? Go, you can go. No, I don't want to go back.
It's fun hanging around you.
Yeah.
That's crazy too.
Yep. And you were thinking that him sitting around you is punishment. And to him, that's what I wanted all along.
Yes. He wanted
I just wanted somebody to give me their full attention.
Yes.
I wanted for a few minutes to be important to somebody. You know how many of our kids are walking around all day long, month long, never feeling important?
Yes.
I remember messaging a kid from my church and said, hey, I was just thinking about you, praying for you, hope everything is great. Just wanted to remind you how awesome you are, you're talented. And he said, wow, I haven't heard anything positive for this month. This is the first positive thing that I've experienced. Now, granted, he may have heard something that might have been meant as positive, but he had not received in himself anything positive for a month.
When I was a principal, I told my faculty, find some kids that don't get the praise all the time. Find them doing something well. Okay. Yes. Write it up for me. Just write Johnny Jones, his mother is so-and-so. Here's the phone number. Here's what they did. And as the principal, I called home to those kids. Yep. So I remember calling one woman and I said, Miss Jones, this is Lucian Yates. I'm the principal at Western.
What did he do?
What did he do this
time? What did he do this time?
I said, oh, you're going to be so pleased. What? And I told her what the teacher had said. She said, this is the first positive call I've ever received from a school.
And that shouldn't be.
That should not be.
That shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be. And I think if you just did those kind of things, yes. I think many of the discipline problems in schools would go away.
It would.
Because they do it, some of the stuff they do is for attention.
For the attention.
They don't get positive. And it's better to get negative attention than get no attention.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have kids who are just hungry and thirsty for adult attention. Somebody to look at me and say that I am worth it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Dr. Yates, I saw a quotation from you online. Essentially, it says something along the lines of the extent to which one has been successful is because of our families, nuclear and extended, who taught us to be gritty, to have grit. Mm-hmm. And I think that is definitely the case. Exactly what we're talking about all day. That it is our responsibility to teach kids how to deal with life. Mm-hmm. If nobody teaches them how to deal with life, how do we expect them to learn? That's exactly. And for Black men, it is our responsibility to teach our kids. We can't leave it to somebody else.
That's right. That's right.
So I want to thank both of you again for a really, really fabulous discussion. I really enjoyed this. I have been looking forward to it. And I hope our audience enjoyed this. This was another episode of the Black Father podcast series. I want to thank you again for your expertise your wisdom, and of course the time that you spent with us. Look forward to seeing you again, everybody, at the next episode. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Black Fatherhood Podcast with Dr. Alvin Thomas. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends on social media or post a review online. Thanks again for being part of the conversation.